Stories by Night warmly greets our dear listeners and viewers. Part 1. Emily Carter's confined life with her aging husband in Los Angeles. On a winding road that snakes through the glamorous Hollywood Hills, where California's radiant sunshine filters through towering palm trees, Emily Carter's pristine white villa stands as a towering symbol of wealth and power. But within those glossy painted walls, the atmosphere is suffocatingly oppressive. Emily, a 40-year-old woman with striking beauty, deep brown eyes that shimmer with pride, a sizzling figure that could grace the pages of Vogue, lives a life that anyone would envy from the outside. Yet that envy only holds true from a distance. For Emily is trapped in a frigid marriage to Richard Harris, a 70-year-old man who was once a titan of Los Angeles' private healthcare industry. Now retired, he has handed over his billion-dollar hospital empire to his eldest son. Emily is no ordinary woman. She carries Vietnamese-American blood, inheriting delicate features from her mother and an impressive height from her father. Her porcelain skin glows, her glossy black hair cascades like silk, and her alluring curves are always accentuated by expensive, form-fitting dresses. But that beauty, rather than being celebrated under staged lights or at lavish Beverly Hills parties, is buried within the sprawling villa, tethered to an aging, frail husband whose deep wrinkles and trembling hands betray a body drained of vitality. Emily's days begin like a loop of hell. She wakes at 6 a.m. in the opulent master bedroom, where a king-size bed draped in costly Italian silk serves more as decor. Richard hasn't slept beside her in years, having moved to a separate room under the excuse of illness. She descends to the kitchen, a space gleaming with sci-fi-worthy modern appliances. With skilled hands, she prepares Richard's breakfast, a fragrant, medium-rare steak, golden fried eggs, and a bold espresso from a $1 million machine. But Richard, with loose dentures and a weak stomach, nibbles a few bites before pushing the plate aside, muttering, "I'm not that hungry, Emily." After breakfast, she wheels his electric chair to Griffith Park, where tree-lined paths and chirping birds fail to lift the heavy silence between them. Richard enjoys the scenery, but his cloudy eyes scan the world lifelessly. Emily, clad in tight leggings and a tank top hugging her frame, draws every eye from early morning joggers. A few muscular men pause, flashing flirtatious smiles, but she meets them with an icy glance. She knows she doesn't belong to the free world out there. At noon, they glide in a sleek black Bentley Continental to Whole Foods in Santa Monica. Emily selects premium organic goods, fresh Maine lobster, Hass avocados from local farms, Napa Valley red wine, all to appease Richard's finicky palate. Yet he manages only a few spoonfuls of soup before slumping in his imported Italian leather armchair, idly scrolling medical news on his iPad with little comprehension. Come evening, she switches on the 85-inch flat-screen TV in the living room, queuing up a documentary on medical history that Richard loves. But within half an hour, his earth-rattling snores drown out the expensive Bose speakers. Their life drags on, day after day, like a dull black-and-white film. Richard's old age is an impenetrable fortress, separating him from Emily's vibrant energy. At 40, she brims with life, yearning to be loved, touched, and to live authentically. But Richard, ravaged by chronic kidney failure and persistent heart pain, is a mere shadow in her world. What will this life become? The question echoes in Emily's mind each night as she lies alone in the vast bed, moonlight spilling through the window onto her beautiful yet anguished face. It's a question without an answer, for the gap between 40 and 70 isn't just time, it's an entire universe. Emily's birth name is Emily Nguyen, a nod to her Vietnamese immigrant mother and her American father, a former real estate entrepreneur in Orange County. 10 years ago, her life took an unexpected turn. At 30, she was a blooming flower, fresh out of FIDM, Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in Los Angeles, with dreams of launching her own fashion label. But those dreams shattered when her father's small real estate firm, focused on suburban homes, went bankrupt after a misguided investment in low-cost housing just before the 2008 financial crisis. Crippled by debt, her family fell into ruin. Her mother wept endlessly. Her father sank into depression, rarely leaving his bed. Richard Harris emerged as a savior amid the storm. As CEO of Harris Medical Center, one of LA's largest private healthcare facilities with branches from San Diego to San Francisco. He was a widower at 60 with 2 grown children, James Harris, his eldest, a brilliant surgeon, and Olivia Harris, his youngest, a gifted pharmacist running her own pharmaceutical company. With vast wealth and a towering reputation, Richard lacked for nothing except a young, beautiful woman to adorn his lonely old age. He met Emily at a charity event at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, where she worked part-time as a server to support her struggling family. In a fitted black dress, her hair cascading, and her smile radiant, Emily instantly captivated him. Richard wasted no time approaching her parents with a deal. He'd pay off their $5 million debt in exchange for Emily's hand in marriage. "She'll live like a queen," he told her father, his tone brimming with the confidence of a man accustomed to buying anything with money. Her parents, heartbroken but desperate, couldn't refuse. Emily resisted fiercely at first. "I'd rather die than marry a man 30 years older than me," she screamed in their rundown Westminster home, where they'd relocated after the bankruptcy. But her mother fell to her knees, tears streaming. "Please, if you don't agree, we won't survive." The weight crushed the young woman's shoulders. Finally, Emily nodded, clutching Richard's multi-million-dollar check, naively thinking, "With money, I'll be happy. What's marrying an old man? I'm young, I'll get through it." She was horribly wrong. The wedding took place in a small Pasadena church, under the curious gaze of LA's elite. Emily wore a pristine white gown, but her eyes were red from crying the night before. Richard, in a black tuxedo, beamed with satisfaction, holding her hand as if she were his most prized trophy. There was no grand reception. Richard didn't want his children to object too strongly. James and Olivia, though displeased, grudgingly accepted it, knowing their father's stubbornness. 10 years on, Emily and Richard's marriage has become a tragic play. The 30-year age gap isn't just about years. It's a chasm of physicality, spirit, and aspiration. Richard, despite his wealth and power, can't fulfill Emily's burning needs. Early on, he tried to be intimate with her, but his aging body limited it to a few times a month, each ending in mutual frustration. "I'm old, Emily," he'd say, voice tinged with guilt, met only by her cold stare. Sex, a natural instinct anyone craves, became a luxury in their home. At the peak of her womanhood, Emily feels like a flower trapped in a glass cage, beautiful but untouched. She once dreamed of passionate nights and tight embraces, but with Richard, those are distant memories of his healthier years, ones she never got to share. Now retired, Richard has passed Harris Medical Center to James. At 38, the handsome Chris Hemsworth look-alike surgeon runs the hospital with an iron fist, turning it into a money-making juggernaut while retaining the admiration of staff and patients. But for Richard, declining health is inescapable. Chronic kidney failure requires dialysis 3 times a week in a private medical room within the villa, overseen by his personal physician, Dr. Mark Sullivan, a stern, middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses and a frigid demeanor. Emily despises Mark. He's not just Richard's caretaker, but her overseer, watching her every move like she's a prisoner. "Mrs. Harris, he needs rest. Don't bother him too much," he'd say dryly, making her want to scream, "I'm not this old man's servant." But she holds back, knowing Mark reports to James, the one person she doesn't want to alienate. Emily's life revolves around tending to Richard, but it's a life sentence. She cooks elaborate meals, Texas-style BBQ ribs, New Orleans steamed seafood, but Richard rarely finishes them. She assists with his physical therapy in their home gym, where cutting-edge equipment worth tens of thousands serves a frail old man. She drives him down Rodeo Drive, where Gucci and Chanel storefronts taunt her with a freedom she craves, yet she remains behind his wheelchair, a shadow. 10 years of this routine have left Emily suffocating. At 40, she's still a blazing flame, her body toned from yoga and Pilates, her skin flawless from Rodeo Drive cosmetics, her eyes alight with a hunger for life. But Richard can't match her. Early in their marriage, he managed occasional intimacy, but now his failing health has extinguished all desire. For a full year, he hasn't touched her, leaving her alone in the lavish bedroom, where silk pillows offer hollow comfort. Materially, Emily wants for nothing: unlimited black cards, a wardrobe of Versace dresses and Louboutin heels, but her heart is as barren as the Mojave Desert. Night after night, she's jolted awake by Richard's earthquake-like snores from the next room. "How can this old man not just die?" she mutters, clutching her pillow, resentment flooding her. With heart disease, high blood pressure, and kidney failure, Richard clings to life as if to punish her. She scrolls through Instagram, seeing old friends living freely in Malibu or Santa Barbara, and wonders, why am I stuck here? One evening, as Richard's snores echo through the villa, Emily stands before the bathroom mirror in a sexy red silk nightgown. She turns, letting the LED lights highlight her perfect curves. "I'm this beautiful. How can I live with a useless old man?" she whispers, her eyes flashing with resolve. From then on, she begins praying, not to God, but to fate, that Richard will soon leave, freeing her to finally live as herself. Part 2. Love at First Strike Under Hollywood Sunshine. The Los Angeles summer blazed like an inferno, the scorching sun from the Pacific spilling over the Hollywood hills, casting a dazzling glow on Emily Carter's pristine white villa. But in her heart, that heat paled in comparison to the fire smoldering within, a fierce longing to break free from the stifling life beside her aging husband, Richard Harris. That day, she decided to escape her daily hell by immersing herself in the infinity pool behind the house, where emerald water mirrored the sunlight like a giant glass. She wore a fiery red bikini that hugged her body, flaunting curves that would make any Hollywood star green with envy. Her brown eyes hid behind Gucci sunglasses, quietly observing the world beyond, a world she craved but couldn't touch. The gentle lapping of water against the pool's edge mingled with jazz drifting from the outdoor Bose speakers. Emily sipped a Mai Tai cocktail, the cool rum spreading through her throat, briefly soothing the restlessness inside. She reclined on a swan-shaped float, letting the water cradle her body, and thought to herself, "Just one day, I want to live for me." But that fleeting dream shattered when the doorbell rang, its sharp chime slicing through the tranquility like a knife. Emily sighed, reluctantly climbing off the float, water dripping from her glossy black hair onto the marble deck. She wrapped a towel around herself and padded barefoot into the house, leaving shimmering trails on the floor. "Who could it be at this hour?" she muttered, glancing at the security camera by the door. On the screen appeared a tall, muscular figure in a white, open-chested shirt and khaki shorts. It was James Harris, Richard's eldest son, heir to the Harris Medical Center empire, and a man Emily had always noticed during his visits to see his father. She quickly adjusted her towel, smoothed her hair, her heart inexplicably racing. James wasn't just a talented surgeon, he had the kind of Hollywood good looks that turned heads, tousled dark blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could melt any heart. At 38, he was the epitome of perfection, wealthy, brilliant, and irresistibly charming. Emily had once heard Olivia, James's younger sister, joke, "He's the kind of guy women would line up to die for with just one glance." And now there he was, standing at her doorstep. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, forcing a calm tone. "James? Come on in." He stepped inside, bringing with him the luxurious scent of Creed Aventus cologne, warming the living room's air. He flashed a grin, revealing pearly white teeth. "Hey, stepmom, were you swimming? You look radiant." Emily smiled back, masking her fluster. "Yeah, it's so hot out. I needed to relax by the pool. Here to see your dad." James nodded, setting a small gift bag on the table. "Yep, just finished a meeting at the hospital and swung by to check on him. How are you holding up?" Emily shrugged, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "I'm surviving, James. Your dad's the same. Weak but stubborn as ever." James chuckled, oblivious to the resentment lurking beneath her words. He strolled into the living room, sinking into the leather sofa, his eyes scanning the elegantly decorated space. "You take great care of him. It puts my mind at ease." But inside Emily, a storm was brewing. She gazed at James, tall, strong, brimming with life, and compared him to Richard, a frail old man who wheezed and snored his days away. The contrast stabbed at her heart. Then unexpectedly, James stood, peeling off his shirt to reveal a chiseled chest and muscular arms. Mind if I borrow the pool? I'm dying of heat after driving from downtown LA. Emily nodded, her mouth dry. Sure, go ahead. The fateful collision. James dove into the pool like an Olympic swimmer, water splashing loudly across the backyard. Emily stood on the second-floor balcony, cocktail in hand, her eyes glued to his every move. He swam with power, glistening droplets clinging to his tan skin, accentuating an irresistible masculinity. She thought to herself, God, how can a man be so perfect? But then, in a moment of distraction, James swam too close to the edge and collided with Emily, who had just stepped down to retrieve a fallen towel. The impact threw her off balance, and she tumbled into his arms. Time seemed to freeze. Emily felt the warmth of his body, his masculine scent mingling with the chlorine of the pool. He held her tightly, voice laced with concern. Are you okay? I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. She looked up, her brown eyes locking with his blue ones, her heart pounding like it might burst. She stammered, I'm fine. I'm okay. But inside, she was anything but fine. She'd been struck by a bolt of love, fierce and unstoppable. James helped her to the edge, his hand lingering lightly on her shoulder. Sit and rest. I'll grab you some water. He dashed inside, leaving Emily there, clutching her chest, her breathing ragged. She watched his retreating figure and whispered, I'm losing it. How can I feel this way about my husband's son? But the feeling didn't fade. It took root in her heart, growing stronger by the second. The arrival of best friend Lisa. That afternoon, after James left following a brief chat with Richard, Emily called Lisa Tran, her college best friend, now a renowned interior designer in West Hollywood. Lisa, with her golden bob haircut and free-spirited style, was always Emily's confidant in times of turmoil. They arranged to meet at a chic cafe on Melrose Avenue, known for its artful lattes and fragrant croissants. Lisa strode in, her red Louboutin heels clicking on the wooden floor, enveloping Emily in a hug. God, you're still as hot as you were at 20. Living with that old man and keeping a figure like this, I'm impressed. Emily gave a faint smile, sipping her coffee. Don't tease me, Lisa. I'm living like I'm already dead. Lisa raised an eyebrow, curious. What's up? Did old Richard do something again? Emily sighed, spilling everything. Her trapped existence, Richard's frailty, and the fateful collision with James. When she mentioned James, Lisa's eyes widened, and she exclaimed, You're kidding me. James Harris? The Apollo lookalike hospital director? You're into him for real? Emily nodded, cheeks flushing. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. He's too perfect, Lisa. Every time I see him, I want to drop everything and run to him. Lisa burst out laughing, drawing stares from nearby tables. You're insane, Emily. He's your stepson. But I get it. I met James at a charity gala once. That guy's the type to drive women wild. What's your next move? Emily bit her lip, her eyes gleaming with resolve. I don't know, but I can't live like this forever. Richard needs to go so I can have a shot with James. Lisa grabbed her hand, voice turning serious. Listen, do what you want, but be careful. James is married to Sarah, some international teacher, gorgeous and smart. You mess with that, and it'll be a huge drama. Emily smirked. I don't care. I just want James. If Sarah's so great, let her keep her husband. The fire in Emily's heart ignites. From that day, Emily's life shifted. She still tended to Richard as usual, cooking, pushing his wheelchair, taking him for walks, but her mind was consumed by James. She started digging into his life on social media. His Instagram was filled with hospital shots, luxe Hawaii vacation pics, and moments with Sarah, his perfect wife with a radiant smile and a supermodel-like frame. But instead of jealousy, it fueled Emily's determination. Sarah may have him now, but I'll make him mine, she told herself. James had been married to Sarah for 5 years with a 3-year-old daughter, Lily, a little angel with blonde hair and blue eyes like her father. Sarah taught at an international school in Brentwood, smart, beautiful, and universally liked. But to Emily, she wasn't a threat. She has everything, but she doesn't understand James like I do, Emily thought, scrolling through his photos on her phone. Late at night, as Richard's snores rumbled like an earthquake, Emily slipped out to the balcony, gazing down at the pool where she and James had collided. She wore a sheer silk nightgown, the night breeze accentuating her alluring figure. "James is my reason to live," she murmured, eyes alight. Though she knew he had a family, she couldn't extinguish the fire within. She often dreamed of him, steamy dreams of them embracing under moonlight on a Malibu beach, living happily ever after. Growing hatred for Richard. The next morning, Emily woke with a heavy heart. Richard, in wrinkled pajamas, sat in his wheelchair and called out, "Emily, make me some tea." She nodded, but inside she wanted to scream, "Why doesn't this old man just die already?" With heart disease, high blood pressure, and kidney failure, he was so frail a strong gust could topple him. Yet he clung to life, snoring loudly every night, robbing her of sleep. She opened her phone, staring at a photo of James at a San Francisco medical conference. Dressed in a black suit, his smile radiant, exuding unshakable confidence. "Only he can keep me going," she whispered, gripping her phone. At 40, Emily still looked 30 thanks to meticulous self-care. Flawless skin, glossy hair, a toned body. She knew she was beautiful, and she wanted James to see it. One evening, James called to say he'd come over for dinner. Emily felt like she'd hit the jackpot. She rushed to the kitchen, preparing his childhood favorite, slow-cooked ribs with potatoes, a recipe she guarded like a treasure, sharing it with no one, not even Sarah or Maria, the middle-aged Mexican housekeeper who was always curious about her cooking. Wearing a tight black dress, she sat before the mirror, admiring herself with satisfaction. Young, sexy, perfect. I can't waste my life on that old man. The doorbell rang, and Emily raced to answer, heart pounding. "James, come in." He stepped inside, smiling. "Hey, stepmom. You look so young, like 30. Emily beamed, replying, "Really? You're making me happy." During dinner, she played the doting wife to Richard in front of James, earning his admiration. "You're amazing. I'm so relieved Dad has you." But inside she wanted to shout, "It's all for you, James." Part 3. Richard's death under cold hands. The radiant morning sunlight of Los Angeles streamed through the large windows of the Hollywood Hills villa, but the interior was steeped in a dark, chilling atmosphere. Emily Carter awoke with weary eyes, the dark circles beneath them impossible to conceal despite the expensive Rodeo Drive foundation she applied. Richard Harris's earthquake-like snores still reverberated from the next room, piercing through the costly soundproof walls like a relentless infernal symphony. She stepped out of bed, her bare feet meeting the cool marble floor, and gazed at herself in the mirror. A stunning 40-year-old woman, yet her eyes burned with desperation and resentment. It had been over a week since James's last visit, and his image, tall, powerful, with a heart-melting smile, haunted her every moment. But each time she thought of him, her gaze shifted to Richard, a gaunt, feeble old man with wrinkled skin and trembling hands clutching his breakfast spoon. The stark contrast stabbed at her heart, fanning the flames of her desire into a raging inferno. "This old man has to die," she muttered, her grip tightening on her red silk nightgown, a cold glint of determination flashing in her eyes. Emily was no longer the naive girl from 10 years ago who believed money could buy happiness. A decade with Richard had hardened her into a woman willing to do anything to escape this gilded cage. She knew his health inside out: chronic kidney failure requiring dialysis 3 times a week, heart disease that left him breathless climbing stairs, and high blood pressure tethering him to medication. Yet despite his frailty, Richard clung to life like a stubborn beast defying death, and Emily could wait no longer. A deadly plot in the lavish kitchen. Emily descended to the kitchen, where gleaming stainless steel appliances reflected the light from a Swarovski crystal chandelier overhead. She opened the fridge, pulling out a premium Wagyu beef cut and a tub of expensive French butter. But today she had no intention of preparing the healthy meals. Dr. Mark Sullivan, Richard's personal physician, always insisted on. Mark, with his gold-rimmed glasses and stern demeanor, meticulously monitored Richard's diet, ensuring it was low in salt, sugar, and fat. Mrs. Harris, he can't handle greasy food, Mark had warned, his voice as dry as an interrogator's. Today, Emily didn't care. She fired up the stove, pouring a generous amount of olive oil into the pan until it sizzled like a miniature volcano. The beef hit the skillet with a loud hiss, the rich, fatty aroma filling the kitchen. She added butter, salt, and a touch of brown sugar, items Mark had strictly forbidden, stirring them into a decadent, greasy steak that could make anyone's mouth water. But in her mind, this wasn't a meal. It was a cleverly disguised poison. When Maria, the middle-aged Mexican housekeeper, wheeled Richard into the dining room, he sniffed the air and grinned. "What's cooking today, Emily?" "It smells amazing." She flashed a saccharine smile, setting the plate before him. "A special steak just for you. You deserve a treat now and then. Don't let Dr. Mark control everything." Richard nodded, unsuspecting, and dug in, cutting a large piece and chewing eagerly. "Delicious, my love," he rasped, his voice hoarse with age. Emily sat across from him, a glass of red wine in hand, watching his every move like a predator stalking prey. She knew this meal would spike his heart rate, send his blood pressure soaring, and overwork his failing kidneys. But she didn't stop there. At noon, she prepared a bowl of sickly sweet oatmeal laced with honey and heavy cream, a dish Richard adored but Mark had banned. "Eat up. I made it because you love it," she cooed, and Richard devoured it, oblivious to her intent. By evening, she ordered from Domino's, a large pepperoni pizza dripping with cheese and grease, paired with a sugar-laden bottle of Coca-Cola. Richard, unaccustomed to fast food, hesitated. "I'm not sure I should eat this," but Emily's honeyed voice persuaded him. "What's wrong with breaking the rules once in a while? Life's too short." He relented, polishing off 3 slices and half the soda, while Emily watched, her eyes glinting with wicked delight. An unexpected death at the movies. Days later, Richard's health visibly deteriorated. His breathing grew labored, his skin turned ashen, and his trembling hands could barely hold a glass. Dr. Mark arrived to check on him, frowning as he took his blood pressure. "Mrs. Harris, what did he eat? His readings are off the charts. I've told you this before." Emily feigned innocence. "I don't know, doctor. He kept begging for tasty food, so I indulged him." Mark shook his head, scribbling in his notebook, but didn't press further. He prescribed new medication and left, leaving Emily with a sinister smirk. One evening, Richard surprised her with a rare request. "I want to see that medical documentary at the AMC Century City Theater," he said, his weak voice tinged with excitement. Emily agreed instantly, her heart leaping. This is it. She slipped into a fitted emerald dress, applied meticulous makeup to maintain her flawless facade, and wheeled Richard into the Bentley. He coughed violently en route, but she patted his shoulder. "Hang on, we're almost there." At the theater, she bought a massive tub of butter-drenched popcorn and a giant Pepsi, items Mark would have screamed about. Richard beamed. "It's been ages since I've had this stuff." "Thank you, Emily," she smiled back. "Anything to make you happy." They settled into the dimly lit theater, the screen's glow illuminating Richard's wrinkled face and Emily's sharp beauty. 30 minutes into the film, Richard munched popcorn, engrossed. Then abruptly he clutched his chest, his face paling, sweat pouring like rain. "Emily, help me!" he gasped, his cloudy eyes pleading. She turned, watching him writhe, hands gripping his chest, but she didn't move. She popped a piece of popcorn into her mouth, her gaze icy as he thrashed. "Help me!" Richard cried one last time, his voice fading, before slumping lifeless in his seat. His shout drew a few glances, but Emily stayed still, only feigning panic when theater staff rushed over. She leapt up, shouting, "Someone call an ambulance! My husband's having a heart attack!" Inside, she rejoiced. "He's finally dead!" "I'm free." Staff dialed 911, and paramedics arrived within 10 minutes. But Richard was gone. Emily bowed her head, tears streaming, not from grief, but from her stellar performance. "Honey, why'd you leave me?" she sobbed, earning pity from onlookers, none suspecting a thing. The funeral and Emily's deception. Richard's body was taken to a Pasadena funeral home where the Harris family held the service. Emily donned an elegant black gown and veil, moving with the mournful grace of a perfect widow. James and Olivia flew in from San Francisco that night, heavy with grief. James, in a fitted black suit, hugged Emily, his voice choked. "Don't be too sad, Mom. I can't believe he's gone so fast." Emily nodded, tears rolling. "I didn't expect it either, James. He'd been weak for so long, but I kept hoping." Olivia, with curly brown hair and red-rimmed eyes, clasped Emily's hand. "Thank you for taking care of Dad. I know he was difficult, but you did your best." Emily offered a faint smile. "I just did my duty, Olivia." Inside, she sneered. "If you two knew the truth, you'd kill me right here." The funeral was grand, attended by hundreds, from renowned doctors to LA's elite, paying their respects. James delivered the eulogy, his voice deep and warm. "My father was a great man who devoted his life to medicine. I'll carry on his legacy." Emily sat in the front row, head bowed, but her eyes stole glances at James, the man now at the center of her world. As Richard's coffin descended into the grave, she whispered, "Goodbye, old man. Now I live for myself." James's reaction and Emily's opportunity. After the funeral, James stayed at the villa for a few days to sort through his father's estate papers. He sat in Richard's study, flipping through files, his blue eyes shadowed with sorrow. Emily entered, carrying a silver tea tray. "Have some tea. Don't work too late." James looked up, managing a small smile. "Thanks, Mom. I still can't believe he's gone." Emily sat on the sofa across from him, her tone soft. "Me neither, James. But he'd been sick for so long. Maybe this was his release." James nodded, rubbing his forehead. "I just wish I'd been there more. Thank God you took care of him." Emily lowered her gaze, hiding a wicked grin. "I only did what was best for him." Then she looked up, eyes glistening. "Now that he's gone, I don't know how to go on. I'm so lonely, James." He rose, crossing to hug her. "Don't worry. I'll take care of you in Dad's place. Your family." Emily melted into his embrace, feeling his warmth, her heart singing, "This is my chance. He'll be mine." But another plan brewed in her mind. Richard was dead, but James still had Sarah, the perfect wife waiting at home. Emily knew that to claim James, she'd need to act swiftly and cunningly. She whispered to herself, "Sarah, you think you can keep him forever? Just wait." Suspicion from Dr. Mark. The next day, Dr. Mark Sullivan arrived to retrieve Richard's medical records. He stepped in, his sharp gaze sweeping over Emily. "Mrs. Harris, we need to talk." She raised an eyebrow, voice calm. "About what, doctor?" Mark set his glasses on the table, his tone curt. "I reviewed Mr. Harris's last checkup. His blood pressure and sugar spiked unnaturally before he died. Did you feed him anything unusual?" Emily flinched but quickly composed herself. "I don't recall exactly. He kept demanding tasty food, so I humored him." "You know how stubborn he was?" Mark stared as if trying to pierce her mask. "I'm not convinced, but if anything's off, I'll tell James." He stood and left, leaving Emily's heart pounding. "That old man suspects me," she thought, gripping the chair. But she reassured herself, "No matter. There's no proof. James will believe me." Part 4. A forbidden romance under Hollywood lights. The Hollywood Hills villa basked in the glow of a radiant Los Angeles sunset, the golden-orange rays of dusk streaming through large windows, casting long streaks of light across the marble floor. It had been a week since Richard Harris's death, and the house was no longer weighed down by his thunderous snores or his demanding whims. But for Emily Carter, this newfound freedom wasn't just an escape from an impotent old man. It was the gateway to the life she'd long craved, with James Harris at the heart of her every dream. Emily stood before the mirror in the master bedroom, now entirely hers. She wore a tight black silk dress that grazed her knees, but featured daring slits at the chest and thigh, revealing smooth porcelain skin and lethal curves. Her glossy black hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, accentuating her deep brown eyes, which gleamed with resolve. She applied a bold red lipstick, studied her reflection, and smirked wickedly. Richard's dead. Now it's time to live for myself, James. She knew James was staying at the villa for a few days to handle inheritance paperwork, and this was her golden opportunity to strike. The first steps of seduction. That evening, James sat in his father's study, the desk lamp illuminating his handsome face. Exhausted blue eyes tousled dark blonde hair after a long day. He wore an unbuttoned white shirt, flipping through documents about Harris Medical Center shares. Emily entered, carrying a silver tray with a fragrant pot of Earl Grey tea and 2 pristine porcelain cups. "You're working too late, James. Have some tea before you wear yourself out," she said, her voice as soothing as a cool breeze. James looked up, offering a faint smile. "Thanks, Mom. I'm trying to wrap this up so I can head back to Sarah and Lily tomorrow." At the mention of Sarah, Emily paused for a split second but masked it with a sweet smile. "You're so thoughtful. Sarah's lucky to have you." She set the tray on the desk, deliberately leaning forward so James caught a glimpse of her cleavage through the dress's slit. He averted his eyes, slightly flustered, but said nothing. Emily sat on the sofa across from him, crossing her legs to reveal a sleek thigh. "I'm so sad, James. With your dad gone, I don't know how to go on. This house is too big, too lonely." Her voice trembled, her eyes shimmering as if on the verge of tears. James stood, crossing to her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry. I won't leave you alone. I promise." She looked up, locking eyes with him, her hand gently brushing his. "Do you mean that?" "You're all I have left to lean on." In that moment, time seemed to halt. James felt the warmth of her touch, her gaze a seductive invitation. He pulled his hand back, stammering, I'll pour the tea." But Emily didn't let the chance slip. She rose, following him, brushing lightly against him. "Let me help. I don't want you overdoing it." James nodded, unaware he just stepped into a carefully laid trap. A trap in the shadows. The next night, Emily escalated her plan. She invited James to stay for dinner, claiming she needed company to ease the grief of losing her husband. James agreed, calling Sarah. "I'm staying with my stepmom tonight, don't worry. I'll be home early tomorrow." From their modern Brentwood home, Sarah replied warmly, "Okay, honey, take care of her for me. Lily and I will wait for you." Emily, eavesdropping outside the study, curled her lips into a malicious grin. "Sarah, keep waiting. He's not coming back to you." She prepared an extravagant dinner, honey-glazed BBQ ribs, creamy mashed potatoes, and a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. The dining table glowed with candles and white roses, crafting an intimate yet tantalizing atmosphere. When James entered, he blinked in surprise. "You made all this? It's like a feast." Emily smiled, her voice honeyed. "I want you to be happy. You deserve to be taken care of." They sat across from each other, candlelight dancing on Emily's face, making her look like a goddess from a painting. She poured the wine, raising her glass. "To you, the most wonderful man I know." James chuckled, clinking glasses. "Thanks, Mom. You're pretty great too." The wine warmed their throats, heating the air. Emily shared lighthearted stories, leaning forward to flash her cleavage, occasionally brushing his hand as she passed dishes. After dinner, she feigned drunkenness, collapsing into James's arms. "I'm so dizzy. Can you help me to my room?" James, flustered, supported her. "You drank too much. Let me get you upstairs." He guided her up the stairs, oblivious to her silk dress slipping off one shoulder, exposing smooth skin under the dim lights. In the bedroom, Emily clung to him, whispering, "Don't go. Stay with me tonight. I'm scared of being alone." James froze, pushing her gently away. "Mom, I can't. I have Sarah." But Emily held on, her eyes glistening. "I like you, James. I've been lonely too long. You don't understand." He stood still, heart pounding, torn between reason and emotion. Finally, he sighed, turning away. "Rest. I'll be downstairs. But his eyes wavered, and Emily knew she planted the seed of forbidden desire. The forbidden affair ignites. Days later, James returned to the villa for more paperwork. Emily greeted him in a sheer silk nightgown, letting him glimpse her alluring figure through the fabric. She stepped close, voice trembling. "James, I can't take it anymore. I need you." This time he didn't resist. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her fiercely, as if all moral barriers melted in a blaze of lust. They tumbled onto the sofa, lost in a forbidden frenzy, heedless of the world outside. From then on, they met secretly each week. James used late hospital meetings as an excuse to visit the villa, where Emily awaited in her most provocative outfits. They made love on the bed, in the bathroom, even by the pool, where their first collision had sparked it all. Each encounter revived Emily, while James, ensnared in guilt, couldn't stop. "I've never felt like this," he whispered after a wild night, stroking her hair. Emily smiled triumphantly. "Because you belong to me, James." Right, but Jevers the truth. But their illicit bliss didn't last. Sarah Harris, sharp and perceptive, grew suspicious of James's frequent late nights. She enlisted Jessica, a colleague at Brentwood's International School, to tail him. Jessica, with fiery red hair and a blunt demeanor, snapped photos of James leaving Emily's villa at midnight, hand in hand with his stepmom. She texted them to Sarah. "Sorry, but you need to know." Sarah opened the images, hands shaking, her green eyes brimming with tears. She called James, voice breaking. "Where are you?" "Fresh from the villa," he lied. "Just finished a meeting at the hospital." Sarah screamed. "Stop lying. I have pictures of you with your stepmom. You slept with her, didn't you?" James fell silent, unable to deny it. Sarah hurled her phone to the floor, sobbing, "How could you do this to me and Lily?" The next morning, she stormed to the villa for a confrontation. Emily opened the door in a red silk nightgown, smirking. "Hi, Sarah. Looking for James?" Sarah lunged, slapping Emily hard. "You vile woman! You stole my husband!" Emily clutched her cheek, laughing coldly. "I didn't steal him. He chose me." James rushed out, trying to intervene. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing." But Sarah turned, eyes blazing. "You and her deserve to die. I'm divorcing you, James. Never see me or Lily again." She stormed off, leaving James crumpled on the floor, hands clutching his head in agony. Emily stood by, stroking his hair. "Don't be sad, James. You have me now." But a flicker of unease crept into her heart. Sarah wouldn't let this go quietly, and she knew it. Lisa's warning. That night, Emily summoned Lisa Tran to a West Hollywood rooftop bar to spill everything. Lisa, in a tight black jumpsuit, gaped as the story unfolded. "You're insane, Emily. Sleeping with James? Now that Sarah knows, you're done." Emily sipped her martini unfazed. "I'm not scared. James loves me. I can feel it." Lisa shook her head. "You're naive. Guys like James don't leave their wives and kids. You're just a fling. Back off before Sarah does something drastic." Emily laughed loudly. "Back off? Never. I killed Richard for this. If Sarah's so great, let her fight me." Lisa sighed, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I've warned you. Don't make me say I told you so when it all falls apart." Emily shrugged, her eyes blazing with ambition. "Just watch, Lisa. I'll win." Part 5. Talia's Arrival and the Storm of Jealousy. Neon lights from the billboards along Sunset Boulevard flickered in the Los Angeles night, casting a glow over the bustling streets and upscale bars. Inside the Hollywood Hills villa, Emily Carter reclined on a white leather sofa, running her fingers through her glossy black hair, her brown eyes sparkling with the thrill of victory. James Harris, the man she'd coveted for so long, was now hers, even if only in the shadows of their clandestine rendezvous. Yet that happiness was as fragile as the villa's glass walls, poised to shatter at any moment. Sarah had uncovered the truth, and the slap she delivered still stung Emily, not just on her skin, but deep in her soul. James sat at the dining table, a glass of whiskey in hand, his deep blue eyes clouded with sorrow. He'd just argued with Sarah over the phone, pleading for forgiveness, only to be met with icy silence. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't know what I was doing," he muttered, but Emily cut in, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Stop thinking about her, James. She doesn't deserve you. I'm here for you." James looked at her, his gaze wavering between guilt and desire, then sighed. "You don't get it. I love Sarah, but I can't resist you." Emily smirked triumphantly, stepping behind him to wrap her arms around his chest. "You don't need her. I'll give you everything. Love, passion, freedom. Forget Sarah." But a crack had formed in James's heart. He loved Emily, or rather, was ensnared by her deadly allure. But the images of Sarah and their daughter Lily haunted him every night. One evening, while Emily was at a Beverly Hills spa, unwinding from days of tension, James drove to a posh West Hollywood bar to blow off steam. There he met Thalia Lopez, a 20-year-old with long, curly brown hair, full lips, and a body as scorching as a Victoria's Secret model. Thalia, a UCLA communications student, didn't dream of diplomas. She dreamed of money, cars, and the lavish lifestyle rich men like James could provide. Thalia approached James the moment he settled at the bar, whiskey in hand. She wore a tight red dress, scandalously short, flaunting endless legs. "Hi there. You look so down. All alone?" she asked, her voice as sweet as honey. James glanced up, mildly startled by her boldness. "Yeah, I just needed some quiet." Thalia smiled, sliding onto the stool beside him. "I'm Thalia. I can cheer you up if you'd like." James initially meant to brush her off, but Thalia's sultry eyes and smile swayed him. After a few drinks, he spilled his woes, the pressure at the hospital, his father's death, his chaotic life. Though he omitted Emily and Sarah. Thalia listened, her hand brushing his, nodding sympathetically. "You deserve to be loved, James. I can make you forget everything." That night, they left the bar together, climbed into James's Bentley, and ended up in a luxe Santa Monica hotel. From then on, Thalia became James's secret mistress. He set her up in a small Hollywood Hills apartment, bought her a shiny red Mercedes, and took her shopping on Rodeo Drive every weekend. Thalia, with insatiable greed, milked him for all she could. "Baby, I want this Chanel bag," she'd coo, and James, though weary, agreed. "Fine, whatever you want." But Thalia's bliss didn't last when Emily discovered her existence. One afternoon after James left the villa following a passionate night, Emily sneaked a peek at his phone, a new habit to ensure he wasn't returning to Sarah. She spotted a text from T. Lopes. "Love, come over tonight." "I miss you." Emily gripped the phone, her eyes blazing with jealousy. "Who's this little tramp trying to steal my James?" She hired a private investigator, Tony Vega, an Italian man with silver hair and razor-sharp eyes, to tail James. Within 2 days, Tony sent her photos of James and Thalia embracing in his car, along with her apartment address. Enraged, Emily sped to the Hollywood Hills unit. She pounded on the door, shouting, "Open up, you bitch! I know you're in there!" Thalia flung the door open, clad in a thin silk robe, sneering, "Who are you to make a scene here?" Emily charged forward, jabbing a finger in her face. "I'm James's woman. How dare you seduce him?" Thalia laughed loudly. "Oh, you're the legendary stepmom? James is bored of you, old lady. He needs someone young like me." Emily snapped, slapping Thalia hard. "You'll regret that." A fierce catfight erupted. Thalia shoved Emily back, and they grappled, tearing at each other's clothes, shattering a living room mirror. Neighbors called the cops, but before they arrived, Emily screamed, "I'm pregnant with James's baby. You'll never take him." Thalia froze, then smirked. "Pregnant? Even better. James will ditch you the moment he sees you as a burden." Thalia relayed Emily's pregnancy claim to James, embellishing it to spook him. "Baby, she says she's carrying your kid. She's old. What are you going to do?" she purred, stroking his chest in her apartment. James, already tired of Emily's clinginess, gaped. "Pregnant? How's that possible?" He raced to the villa, confronting Emily. "Is it true? You're pregnant?" Emily nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, James. It's ours. You have to take responsibility." But instead of joy, James exploded. "You're insane. I don't want this baby. I can't keep doing this." He turned to Thalia, who stood by the door, grinning victoriously. Thalia, you're right. I need you more than her. Emily crumbled, shrieking after him. James, you can't leave me. I did everything for you. But James replied coldly, Deal with it yourself. I'm done. He walked out with Thalia, leaving Emily collapsed on the floor, clutching her stomach, tears streaming. Meanwhile, Sarah finalized the divorce. She hired LA's top lawyer, Rachel Kim, a sharp-witted Korean-American woman, to ensure James lost custody of Lily. One morning, she arrived at the villa with Rachel, divorce papers and a suitcase of James's clothes in tow. Emily opened the door, pale from James's betrayal, but Sarah didn't care. She tossed the suitcase inside. Here's James's stuff. Keep it if you want. I don't. Emily tried a smug laugh. You lost, Sarah. James is mine. But Sarah stepped forward, voice like ice. You're wrong. James belongs to no one. He's a traitor. I'm done with you, him, and that little tramp Thalia. Divorce is final, and Lily and I will thrive without him. Rachel handed Emily the papers. James signed. You've got nothing left to cling to. Sarah walked away without looking back. Emily stood frozen, trembling hands clutching the documents. She'd lost everything. James, Sarah, and her dream of a happy family. But the baby in her womb remained her last hope. She whispered, My child, I won't give up. That night, Emily returned to Thalia's apartment, determined to eliminate her rival. She brought a bottle of red wine, feigning reconciliation. Thalia, can we talk? I don't want to fight anymore. Thalia, naive and swayed by greed, let her in. But as Thalia turned her back, Emily raised the bottle to smash it over her head. Thalia caught on, screamed, and the two lunged at each other again. In the chaos, Emily suddenly doubled over in labor pains, collapsing to the floor. Clutching her stomach, Help me! I'm giving birth! Panicked, Thalia called James. Get here now! She's about to give birth! James rushed over, joined by Sarah, who happened to be driving nearby after hearing from Jessica. They got Emily to the hospital, but it was too late. Part 6. Emily's Death and the Final Nightmare. The Los Angeles night was shrouded in dense fog, the dim glow of streetlights filtering through the haze from the 101 freeway, creating a somber scene that mirrored Emily Carter's life at that moment. Thalia Lopez's small Hollywood Hills apartment had become a war zone. Shards of the red wine bottle Emily brought were scattered across the floor. Bloodstains splattered from the vicious, jealousy-fueled fight between the two women. Emily, her black silk dress in tatters, lay curled up on the ground, clutching her 8-month pregnant belly, her face ghostly pale as sudden labor pains struck. Thalia, her brown hair disheveled and scratches marking her face, stood frozen, her trembling hands gripping the phone she'd just used to call James Harris. James, get here now! She's about to give birth, and I don't know what to do! Thalia screamed, her voice cracking with panic. On the other end, James was driving down Wilshire Boulevard, his heart racing at the news. What? Giving birth? Hold on, I'm coming, he replied, slamming the accelerator of his black Bentley, speeding through LA's crowded traffic. But fate had more twists in store. Sarah Harris, having just left her lawyer Rachel Kim's office in downtown LA, was driving through Hollywood Hills on her way back to Brentwood. She received a text from Jessica, the colleague who'd uncovered James and Emily's affair. Sarah, I just heard neighbors in Hollywood Hills called the cops about a fight. Sounds like James's usual haunt. You okay? Sarah tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her green eyes blazing with anger. What's James done now? She turned toward Thalia's apartment, unaware she was about to step into a horrifying tragedy. When James and Sarah arrived almost simultaneously, they found Emily sprawled on the floor, gasping for breath, blood pooling from her legs. Thalia cowered in a corner, her face drained of color. I didn't do anything. She fell on her own. James rushed to Emily, lifting her. Mom, how are you? Hang on, I'll get you to a hospital. Sarah, despite her loathing for Emily, couldn't stand by as a woman in labor died before her. She yelled James, call 911. Now. But Emily gripped James's hand, her voice faint. It's too late. My baby. I'm sorry. She clenched her teeth, her body racked with violent convulsions. In a delirious haze, she gave birth to a boy right there on the floor, the child's weak cries piercing the chaotic silence. Sarah knelt, using Thalia's towel to cradle the baby, while James clutched his head in panic. "Mom, don't die, please!" Emily opened her eyes one last time, gazing at James and Sarah, whispering, "James, Sarah, take care of my son. I was wrong." Her head fell to the side, her breathing ceased. Sarah held the baby close, tears streaming onto its tiny face. "God, how did this happen?" James collapsed, screaming in anguish. "Mom!" Thalia stood motionless, trembling. "I didn't mean it. I swear." Police and paramedics arrived soon after, but Emily was gone forever. The infant was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, while James and Sarah were detained for statements. Thalia, in a frantic state, explained that she and Emily fought over jealousy, but no one anticipated her going into labor. James cradled his head, muttering, "It's all my fault. I killed her." After Emily's death, James plummeted into a chasm of guilt and hatred. He blamed Thalia, the woman who'd lured him into a new affair, unraveling everything. One evening, Thalia visited Harris Medical Center to confront him, intent on blackmail. She strode into his office in a tight red dress, smirking. "James, you can't escape me. I've got photos and texts of us. Give me $500,000 or I'll leak everything, including how you slept with your stepmom." James, already drained from days of clashing with Sarah and mourning Emily, erupted. He stood, eyes bloodshot. "You dare threaten me? You're why she's dead." Thalia laughed. "She died on her own. What's that got to do with me? Pay up or your career's toast." In a blind rage, James lunged, his hands clamping around her throat. "You deserve to die." Thalia thrashed, her nails raking his face, but James didn't let go. She grabbed a letter opener from the desk, stabbing his shoulder, blood pouring out. James roared in pain, but his frenzy made him stronger. He wrested the knife free and stabbed her chest repeatedly, blood splattering the walls and floor. Thalia fell, her eyes wide with horror, her breath fading. James stood over her body, hands blood-soaked, trembling. "I didn't want this, but you forced me." He sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, until hospital security burst in after hearing the commotion. "Mr. Harris, oh my God, what happened?" a guard shouted, calling the police immediately. James didn't resist as they handcuffed him, his eyes hollow. "I killed her. I'll take the blame." Meanwhile, Sarah brought Emily and James's newborn son to her Brentwood home. She named him Ethan, meaning strong, hoping he'd overcome his parents' tragedy. Though she despised James, she couldn't abandon Ethan, an innocent child whose mother's dying words echoed in her mind. "Take care of my son." She called Rachel Kim. "Rachel, I want to adopt Ethan. James has no claim to Lily or this boy anymore." Rachel arrived promptly with paperwork. "Sarah, are you sure? Raising 2 kids alone isn't easy." Sarah nodded, her eyes resolute. "I won't forgive James, but I won't let his son suffer." "I can do this." Rachel smiled, patting her shoulder. "You're stronger than you know." James was arrested after killing Thalia. He surrendered at the Hollywood precinct, confessing everything: his affair with Emily, her death, and the frenzied murder. His storied career as Harris Medical Center's director evaporated. LA headlines blared, "Billionaire doctor kills young mistress after pregnant stepmom's death." James was sentenced to life without parole. A year later, Sarah met Michael Stone, a wealthy British entrepreneur with a chain of luxury hotels from LA to London. Michael, with rugged silver hair and warm brown eyes, met Sarah at a Beverly Hills charity event hosted by Jessica. He was drawn to her elegant beauty and resilience as a single mother to Lily, her daughter with James, and Ethan, Emily's son. Michael approached her, offering a glass of wine. "I hear you're an incredible mom. I'm truly impressed." Sarah gave a faint smile. "Thanks, but I just do what's necessary." Their relationship blossomed from there. Michael brought Sarah love, financial support, and emotional stability. He adopted Ethan and treated Lily as his own, forging a happy family in a new Pacific Palisades villa. One day at Sarah's request, Michael visited James in prison. Sitting across the glass, he spoke calmly. Sarah asked me to tell you she forgives you, but she won't forget. She wants you to live well in here, for Lily and Ethan. James, gaunt in his prison uniform, tears streaming, replied, Thank you. And Sarah. I don't deserve it. Part 7. The Conclusion of Shattered Lives. The radiant morning sun of Los Angeles streamed through the towering palm trees of Pacific Palisades, where a new cream-colored villa stood proudly by the Pacific Ocean. A gentle sea breeze wafted through wide-open windows, carrying the salty scent of the coast and the soothing sound of waves crashing. Inside, Sarah Harris, now Sarah Stone, stood in a modern kitchen, stirring a pot of fragrant seafood chowder. She wore an elegant white maxi dress, her blonde hair tied high, her green eyes reflecting a rare peace after years of turmoil. 2 children, Lily, 5, and Ethan, nearly 2, ran and played in the backyard, their innocent laughter echoing through the expansive space. Sarah had found new happiness with Michael Stone, her wealthy and warm-hearted entrepreneur husband. But the painful past, the broken marriage with James, Emily's death, and Thalia's tragedy, remained faint scars on her heart. Today, she was preparing a family meal to welcome Jessica, her steadfast friend through every storm, and Rachel Kim, the lawyer who'd helped her reclaim her life. It marked 1 year since she officially divorced James and started anew. Meanwhile, dozens of miles away, in the California State Prison in Lancaster, James Harris sat in a cold cell, weak light from a small window illuminating his gaunt face. The wrinkled orange prison uniform clung to a once muscular frame now withered, his deep blue eyes clouded from sleepless nights and gnawing remorse. He held an old photo of him, Sarah, and Lily at Disneyland years ago, his trembling fingers tracing their faces. I destroyed everything, he muttered, his voice hoarse. James was serving a life sentence without parole for Thalia Lopez's murder. His trial at the Los Angeles Superior Court had been a media frenzy. Headlines branded him the killer doctor, dissecting every detail from his taboo affair with Emily to Thalia's gruesome death. Olivia Harris, his sister, disowned him after the verdict, declaring, "You're no longer my brother." Harris Medical Center was sold to a major healthcare conglomerate, erasing the Harris family's legacy from LA's medical world. Yet in prison, James wasn't entirely hopeless. Michael Stone, honoring Sarah's wishes, occasionally sent him books and letters updating him on Lily and Ethan. One afternoon, he received a new handwritten note from Michael on crisp white paper. James, Sarah, and the kids are doing well. Lily started kindergarten, and Ethan's calling me Dad. Sarah wants you to know she doesn't hate you anymore. Live well in there. For the kids. Tears streamed down James's hollow cheeks as he read it. He whispered, "Thank you, Michael. And Sarah. I'll try, even if it's just to atone a little." James joined a prison rehabilitation program, teaching basic medicine to fellow inmates. He found a sliver of purpose in sharing the knowledge that once defined his pride. A young prisoner named Miguel, with short black hair and curious eyes, became his close student. "You were a big doctor, huh? How'd you end up here?" Miguel asked during a lesson. James gave a sad smile. "Because I chose the wrong path, Miguel. Don't be like me." He lived with a faint hope of parole someday, though he knew it was nearly impossible. In Pacific Palisades, Sarah had cut all direct ties with James, but she didn't stop Michael from maintaining minimal contact for the children's sake. Michael Stone, with his thriving hotel empire, was her perfect rock. He built a playroom for Lily and Ethan in the villa, its walls adorned with colorful murals and high-end toys from FAO Schwartz. "I want the kids to grow up wanting for nothing," he said, wrapping his arms around Sarah one peaceful evening. Lily, with blonde hair and blue eyes like James, now naturally called Michael Dad. She remembered little of her biological father, knowing him only through Sarah's vague tales. "Your dad was a doctor, but he's far away now." Ethan, with brown eyes and fair skin like Emily, was an energetic boy who shadowed Lily everywhere. Watching them play, Sarah felt relief. "I did the right thing taking Ethan in. He doesn't deserve to suffer for his parents' mistakes." Jessica and Rachel visited that weekend, bringing pastries and wine. Jessica, in a bold red dress, laughed. Sarah, you look like a queen here. Michael's a gem. Rachel, ever composed, nodded. You deserve this happiness, Sarah. After everything you've been through. Sarah smiled, raising her glass. Thanks, you two. I wouldn't have made it without you. Michael stepped in, carrying Ethan, kissing Sarah's cheek. You're the strongest person I know, Sarah. She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of the man who'd brought light back into her life. The past with James, Emily, and Thalia was now a distant nightmare, fading like morning fog over Malibu Beach. Though Emily and Thalia were gone, their shadows lingered over those left behind. The Hollywood Hills villa was sold to a wealthy film producer, but rumors swirled that Emily's ghost haunted it. Maria, Emily's former housekeeper after quitting, told friends, I heard her crying at night, like she was apologizing to someone. Though mere gossip, it lent the house a mysterious aura in LA's eyes. Thalia, meanwhile, left a brief but infamous legacy. Her Hollywood Hills apartment was sealed after the murder, but some UCLA students still whispered about the hot girl who died for greed. A classmate, Carla, a petite girl with pink hair, once tearfully said, Thalia just wanted a lavish life, but she picked the wrong guy to exploit. Emily died in pain and regret, leaving Ethan as a belated apology to Sarah. Before her death, she'd realized her mistakes, killing Richard, seducing James, envying Thalia, but it was far too late. Thalia, driven by burning ambition, ended her short life in blood and tears, the final victim of this tragic chain. The fates of the characters. James Harris. In prison, he lives with remorse and a flicker of hope. No longer the arrogant billionaire doctor, he's a convict seeking redemption by helping others. Michael promised to bring Lily and Ethan to visit once they're older, but that's the extent of Sarah's forgiveness. Sarah Stone. Independent and happy with Michael, she's a symbol of resilience. She started a charity to help women escape toxic relationships, inspired by her own life. Lily and Ethan grow up surrounded by love, free from their past shadows. Emily Carter. Died in agony and remorse, leaving Ethan as her sole surviving legacy. Her ghost, though rumored, serves as a reminder of the consequences of greed and desire. Thalia Lopez. Her brief, ambition-fueled life ended in a bloody death at James's hands, a costly lesson in chasing wealth without weighing the risks. Epilogue. The story closes on Pacific Palisades Beach, where Sarah and Michael walk hand in hand with Lily and Ethan under the sunset. The sound of waves blends with the children's laughter, a healing melody for old wounds. James, in his cell, gazes through a tiny window, dreaming of freedom he knows is out of reach. From beyond, Emily and Thalia leave a steep lesson. Greed and lust can lead to paradise, but they just as easily drag one into hell. The storm has passed, leaving broken lives and survivors piecing themselves together from the ashes. Los Angeles remains dazzling, but beneath its glamorous lights, tragedies like these are an indelible part of the City of Angels. Thank you all for sticking with this dramatic and emotional story until the very end. If you enjoy intense, deep stories like this, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Stories by Night, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts on the fate of James, Sarah, or Emily. I'd love to hear what you think. See you in the next Stories by Night episode. Have a thrilling night.